Hello, everybody, and welcome to this edition of Realty Group's Ask Us Anything. I'm the host, Mike Bernier. We are going to be joined shortly by a really special guest today, somebody that we feel very fortunate that we have connected our wagon to, somebody that we feel blessed to have met, Minnesota's own Ben Utecht, who was once a Minnesota Golden Gopher, went on to the NFL, and even won a Super Bowl with the Colts. He's got such an amazing story of his journey through the sports world and how that has led him into his new venture, which is really becoming sort of a guru on corporate culture, beliefs and values, principles, behaviors that drive a leadership team as well as an organization forward in an intentional way. Now, what I'll say about this is obviously we work with a lot of small business individuals, real estate individuals, mortgage individuals, even solo agents, as we like to call them. And you might think, well, what does corporate culture have to do with anything to do with a solo agent? Well, what I'm going to say first off is remember, as a agent, hey, Ben, he's just walking in the studio now. What's up, buddy? How's it going?
Good.
Come on, take a seat. So I was just kind of queuing you up and telling a little bit about what you do. I'll let you tell better than I do. What I was saying is for the agents out there, the loan officers out there, the small business individuals, the solopreneurs, even though we're talking about corporate culture, they themselves are the CEO of their own business, right? It's you Inc. So this goes all the way down into an individual level that we're going to be talking about today. And I wanted to point that out so people know that there's going to be value. And by the way, I don't know if you've noticed we threw the purple lighting behind you today.
I did.
I mean, even though you weren't technically a Viking, you're a Minnesota guy. So
Always a Vikings fan.
always a Vikings fan. So Ben, for those that don't know Ben, he was a Golden Gopher, graduated into the NFL, won a Super Bowl, with the Colts. So he has an amazing story. But what I want Ben to talk about today, and what we want to explore, is what he does and how valuable that is, whether we're talking about being a larger organization or even just a solo, business owner, self-employed business owner, like a real estate agent, that we work a lot with is real estate agents, loan officers.
Right.
So Ben, with no more further ado, kind of tell us about that journey that I just mentioned. How did that go? What happened?
Well, how I found myself into human resources, right? Which is a department that puts people first, when my former career was to hit people first.
Right.
I don't really know how that happened, but it ultimately was being a part of an organization that built an entire team around the strategy of culture and taking culture out of this subjective, ethereal space that we all talk about, right? Every business, small, mid, large, global, is talking about culture. But
when people talk about culture, to me, when I hear businesses talk about it, how often does it sound like a bumper sticker, right? It's something people talk about.
Exactly.
But it's intangible. You can't get your arms around it. It's just something we all know that we have to talk about in buzzwords, right? I mean, that's sort of how it feels.
That is exactly how it feels. And that's really what I experienced even in the sports culture world until I had a chance to play for Hall of Fame coach Tony Dungy. And he was the first to really show me that culture can be an objective strategy that builds objective systems that you can practice in order to get the behaviors out of yourself and out of your team members. And that was the difference maker, right? His belief was if you build better men, you get better football players. And it wasn't just words. It wasn't just a bumper sticker. It was actually thinking deeply around the value principles that we choose to run our businesses. Every business does a mission, vision, value statement, but rarely do they go beyond the value statement into asking questions like, how can we create a system out of our values that we can actually develop in ourselves and in our team members?
And practice.
Because practice, Simon Sinek made the why, the story famous. The power of the why and understanding why we believe in these value principles is so critical. But the secret sauce, friends, is the how. It's actually being able to practice simply profound systems that actually develop the values in yourself and then have an impact on all of your clients and ultimately team and ultimately the community. You start to gain a reputation because of the objective culture that you've chosen. And that's what every small business owner is capable of doing. And it will make you a differentiator in your industry and market.
Now, you talk about objective culture, subjective. Let's kind of break that down for a minute for people that are wondering, well, what do you mean by subjective versus objective culture? Now, I think that's going to be a huge aha moment for people when you kind of explain that, because that for me, when you can start picking apart that let's say you've got a team of 5 or a team of 50 in your organization, or a team of 500, how everybody views the culture, the belief system, the behaviors. They believe that subjectively.
Right.
They've got their own view and their own version of it, right?
Absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about that, because that's where the power is, getting the entire group of people moving in one direction.
And it really is all about unity and alignment, like Mike was talking about. So the idea of subjectiveness is that truth is what you make truth to be for yourself. So if you, and this never fails, when I go in and work with boards or with executive leadership teams and sit down, and the first thing that I'm asking this group of individuals is to write down your definition of culture. And within 5 minutes, having everybody read that definition, it becomes apparent for the first time that every single person has a different objective definition for themselves of what culture is. And so what it does is it shows the misalignment across executive leadership or across the board on really finding alignment around what is culture, and then what do we actually do about it. So why subjectiveness when it comes to culture can create issues within the workplace is when you're hiring team members and you're bringing in, all sorts of different personalities, and each person brings in their own intrinsic belief system. Then what will happen is you will segregate the team based upon those different beliefs, instead of taking an objective approach from the top down, meaning culture is the leader's choice. So as the small business owner, when you step out and you create the objective value principles and you build out the what, why, and how of the belief system objectively underneath that, and then you hire into that. So you're hiring people that experience and learn your objective approach to culture, and they see it and are inspired by it and choose to commit to that. So now, as you're bringing on team members, everyone is unified and in alignment on a chosen objective value and belief system.
So objective, one culture for the entire organization. Everybody buys in, everybody believes in. I think this is where there's a scarcity mindset with business owners too, because it's sometimes so hard to find good help, good people, right? Whether you're a real estate brokerage hiring agents, a small business hiring employees, there's always this feeling of it's so hard to find good help. Am I really going to limit myself to people that just believe the way I do? I personally find that to be a little bit of a scarcity mindset. I think once you're very, forthcoming with those belief systems, there's a lot of people that wouldn't even consider working with you until they know that about you.
I was gonna say,
So it actually, in my opinion, has the opposite effect. The more transparent you are with those belief and value systems and that culture, then how you actually turn that into behaviors, the more people are going to go, hey, I like that better than where I'm at. We don't have that where I'm at. But I think people need to flip that. Most places most people in the workplace are like, I'm not going to get rid of a good employer or deny somebody that could be a good employee because they believe differently. So let's talk about that for a minute. Like when you've got 15, 20, 50, 100 people, all with conflicting behaviors and beliefs. Could one person be good at some tasks? Sure.
Okay.
But the overall health of the organization, that's really the argument, right? That you're going to get a better overall health of the organization when you have everybody kind of operating under that belief system, that culture system. But why is that?
Well, I think that there's kind of this tension that exists within the idea of conformity. So sometimes you'll get tension from individuals that don't like the idea of having to come in and believe in one certain direction. But that's actually not what is being trained and coached. It's creating value principles that are universal in nature, that we all agree upon traditionally as human beings. The importance of integrity, which is to be honest and to do the right thing. You're not going to find many communities that don't believe integrity is a powerful value system. And so what you're doing is you're really starting at the top in order to create a structure that connects and unifies people on universal value principles that share an aligned belief pattern that everybody can buy into. And what happens is you're still hiring an incredibly diverse population. And so you're not squelching or extinguishing diversity of thought. You're actually enhancing diversity of thought that's connected by
Belief of value.
a
Yeah.
belief and value system. So you're still celebrating in diversity. You're still celebrating in creating an equitable environment for people, but you're doing it through an exclusive value and belief system that really builds upon principles that we all embrace to be important in the culture of our humanity. And so it really is a kind of the combination of the two. And so the whole goal, Mike, about building culture is that it has a transformational quality, because ultimately as humans and as people who work and people who live life with loved ones, we should always take the approach to developing ourselves and really striving towards reaching our greatest potential, because that's contagious. And the stronger we become in life and in business, the greater the ripple effect, positive ripple effect it has when it touches other people.
And I want to talk a little bit about, you mentioned integrity as a universal value that we should all agree, right? If we hire somebody, if that's going to be our core value as a company, we want to make sure that they have the same core value, because their behaviors, this is where I think that people, when they start to understand this piece, it starts to come together. Your value and belief system will dictate your behavior, right? So what we see a lot of times is corporate culture that will claim integrity as a core value, but there's nobody actually practicing it from the leadership down.
I mean, you remember Enron?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
right.
Enron's one of Enron's value principles was integrity.
Right.
And obviously we know what happened with that company, and it was very destructive.
And I wish we could say that was like, an isolated case. The truth is there's so many, a bumper sticker, there's so many value, core values written on, in mission statements written on boards, but they never translate the behavior because they're just not focused on. You talk a lot of, Ben, about, a culture by design versus one by default, right?
Correct.
So let's touch on that for a second if we could, because that's something I think that when you brought up that culture is from the top down, it has to be designed by those with leadership, influence, and control of the company, right? Because otherwise you're leaving it for everybody else to try to decide what the culture is going to be.
Right.
And if you're outnumbered, there's a critical mass that happens. If you're outnumbered in your belief system and what you want your company to be, and you have a whole bunch of other people that are going a different direction, you're outpowered. You're not going to control that.
Yeah, I mean that is kind of a rule that comes out of the social sciences. You will always have a culture by design or default. And if that's true, why not design it? Why not be more intentional and put the time, energy, and maybe money into actually investing in building that culture? And the reason why is because every community, every company, every family has its own culture by default that comes out of the natural behaviors of the people in the community. Because that's true, that what you believe should directly impact how you behave. If you can bring an objective alignment around a shared belief system, right, that is inspired by the group and chosen by the group, now you're developing commitment and loyalty and trust in ways that you've never had before. And once you've established that, and it's actually become a material product in your company, now you can use that in the hiring process and try to do a better job of not only hiring somebody who's great at the role, but they also fit within the culture that you desire. Right. And especially in high performance industries like real estate, principles like execution are incredibly important. But if I sit in a room with 10 realtors and I ask them to define what execution means for them, you're going to get 10 different answers.
Subjective.
So right. And that's it's not a bad thing, because, people are going to find what works for them. But when you're hiring and building a business and building a team, and you've had a lot of success by approaching execution from a very specific strategy, then hiring into that is what is going to bring sustainability to your work and to your performance and to your revenue and all of the things that you need to take seriously as a small business owner, especially.
And let's think about this too. Let's break it down to the, solopreneur real estate agent on the street. How does this really affect them, what we're talking about? If they're saying, well, I'm not hiring, a bunch of people. Well, you really kind of are. you're hiring your clients, you're deciding who you're going to work with, you're deciding how you're going to behave
Yeah,
with those clients, you're deciding, how you want them, what customer experience you want to be able to deliver time and time again. That's
absolutely.
all part of it, right? So one thing that really struck a chord with me, we start thinking about, the three elements of culture that you talk about, what you believe, why you believe it, and then how you behave. How does that translate into how you do your job as a real estate agent?
Sure.
Right. So for example, I like to build systems around everything. If I have to do it more than once, there should be a system around it. But when I start realizing about these belief systems is they actually form those standard operating procedures, those systems. They actually start to form based on your
Right.
belief. So the way I show a house, for example, I've got a system how I do it.
Yeah.
Right. If part of my core belief is that, if I show up on time, I'm already late. Let's say I'm not saying it is for me, but I'm saying, let's say that was. I might build a system around showing a house that I'm always 10 minutes early
Hmm.
every single time without fail, non-negotiable. And in that 10 minutes, in order to perform, I have to leave my house or wherever I'm at a certain time. I have to map it out, figure out if there's traffic or road construction. Like I've actually got to put some work into
Are
this.
you actually coming down on me
Yeah,
for being
I mean,
late?
I didn't say it was your
No,
core value,
right.
but the idea is you're gonna take that piece of it of your system so much more serious because that's your core belief, right? I don't show up like if I'm on time, I'm already late, and I don't do that. I'm not
Right.
gonna give my client that experience. For me, part of what I always did is I was big on red flag avoidance. As I was showing houses, I had a really strong understanding of the systems of houses, strong understanding about what drove value, what the strong understanding of what was going to be a functional problem to resale or what they're going to have a problem living with. So I was all about red flag avoidance. And my system and how I identified those red flags is what got me so many referrals as a buyer's agent early on in
Mhm.
my career. But that was part of my core belief. I believe strongly in educating people beyond educating, but I wanted to make sure they did not end up with a house that they were going to hate or have a financial problem with or have a regret.
Right.
That was core to my business. So how I showed the house and how I facilitated that transaction was systematic around that belief.
Right.
And I think that's where I'm going with this conversation with real estate agents is, when you're talking about building a corporate culture, you are a corporate, you're you Inc. And you run a business and how you believe is going to translate to how you behave.
Yes.
So, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. There's two lanes to consider as a real estate agent, and that is first the internal impact of building a chosen culture, and then second is the client impact of building a chosen culture for yourself. And here's why. I think it was Aristotle that said, "Know thyself." So there's something very powerful in being able to understand yourself more deeply, to connect more to your identity, that allows you to be more impactful in building and sustaining meaningful relationships. And so the first and most important is beginning with that internal. The reason why you want to identify what your core non-negotiable values and beliefs are is to better understand yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And the better you understand yourself, the better you're able to understand others and
Mm-hmm.
to build relationships with others. So it really starts there. And then the second is the client facing application. You have to begin to look at culture through the lens of business development and marketing. And as you know, being in such a highly competitive industry, what is going to differentiate you from other realtors? And to go through that process of creating your own value principles that guide your behaviors, and then spending a little time answering, what do I believe about this value principle? Why do I believe this value principle matters? And how am I going to consistently behave in a manner reflective of that value principle? And when you write those down, you've created a marketing document that differentiates you from other realtors. So now when you're following up on leads and you're meeting with new clients, a part of what you do in the role is now enhanced by your ability to actually share this powerful personal creed with these individuals and to say, look, I'm so excited to be working with you and I want you to know me better.
Mm-hmm.
And I want you to understand what values drive the way that I work and what I believe about those values. And you can share that with them. And it becomes something that they will have received from you that they probably haven't received from any other, agent in the history of their home buying career. Right.
Correct.
And so that's where you're taking it out of this kind of, oh, we're all talking about culture and we know it matters, but how do we actually use it? Well, you're using it for yourself, and then you're using it to have an impact on the people that you come into a relationship with. And if they walk out of that house with that document saying, man, I've never experienced an agent who's been this thoughtful about creating an environment and a culture that I can connect with, you've really set yourself apart.
And let's tear that apart for a minute real quick, because what you talked about there was kind of writing down, a few things, but this is where I think the real magic is here, because you can talk about why integrity is a value, right? You can talk about why being punctual is a value, or why honesty is, or some of the more common ones you hear. You can talk about that. Then when you follow up with the question, well, why do you believe that? And then the next question, how do you practice it? What do you see 9 times out of 10, because we watch this happen, that's where people go, oh crap, how do I articulate this, right?
Right, yeah.
So there was a book we're reading here, and I love this example of it, but the assignment was, write down in detail how you get a glass of water. And everybody, of course, they wrote down and go to the cupboard, they pull out the glass, go to the faucet, open the faucet up, pour the water, close the faucet. They said, no, how does the water get there in the first place? I want you to go deep on this. I want to go deep on your understanding of how the water even ended up in the glass. And so many people are like, well, how do you know how the plumbing works? How's the pressure work? How's the water end with the pipe, right? There's so much we don't think about because
Mhm,
we're on autopilot. We might think about explaining our business. Here's what it's like to work with me.
mhm.
And you're thinking of the top five, like the 5% surface. When you start going into this exercise to really dig apart and pull apart what you believe, why you believe it, and how you practice it, you get so much more articulate about it. You understand yourself and you can explain yourself in a way that connects with people so much better.
Yeah.
But it's that same exercise where you sit there and go, how do I even get to the bottom of this?
Oh,
Like,
100%.
I mean,
Yeah.
that stretches your
So,
mind to think about.
yeah, so that the exercise is powerful for yourselves because what it does is it actually develops deeper levels of wisdom in your life, because wisdom is found at the intersection of knowledge and experience. And so this is a process that you don't want to overthink, because we want to keep things practical. We want them to be tactical so that you can apply them efficiently and apply them easily. And so when you think about principles like integrity, to be honest and to do the right thing. So as a realtor, how are you practicing doing the right thing? And think about that practically. For example, here's an example. When you're done showing a listing, and I know that this is common practice, but I would say that this is practicing integrity. You're going back through that house after the client leaves,
Mhm,
and you're making sure everything is cleaned up. You're making sure all the lights are turned off.
mhm.
All, whatever, however that house was when you entered, you're leaving it
With respect.
with
Yep.
respect, or better than it was when it was left. And maybe you're writing a handwritten note, right? To say thank you. Whatever those are great examples of practical forms of how you're behaving with integrity in that moment. And those are the little things that you want to capture and bullet point and add into that document, because now you're giving the client insight into the way that you do business that they might have never known.
And
So many, you've told me this, you've
mhm.
taught me this, so many of these home buyers leave and they have no idea how much work you put into what you do and how thoughtful you have to be in what you do. And so to bring them into that world, in the why and the how, sets you apart, and it actually allows them to have more of a personal understanding of what you believe, why you do things the way that you do, and especially how. And that becomes a very special
Then
opportunity.
the outcomes start to make sense. Well, this
Correct.
is the outcome of all of it. It's rather than skipping to the outcome. I mentioned the water faucet thing. We kind of skip to the 5% surface things that we think about or understand. We like to talk about the outcomes. I've got a higher average sale price than the next agent. I sell more houses. I mean, that in itself as an outcome doesn't really speak to people.
Right.
What speaks to people is the why, the how. That's where people, they don't really care as much about the outcome when they care about what drives it. That's my experience all day long. And I'd say too that you mentioned that real estate agents don't have, the public understanding of what we do, especially as a buyer's agent. the recent survey was that buyers think that we work 15 hours or less on their transaction and on their file, like start to finish. It's actually on average more than 100 hours at this point. But they
Absolutely.
have
Yeah.
no idea, right?
They
They
have
don't
no idea.
know how the sausage is being made behind the scenes, right?
Right.
And in the thought process is we don't want them to know. We don't want them to know what we go through. We want to make it look easy,
Mm,
and quite frankly, I think that's where there's a disconnect, because it's not that you have to share every problem that's going on with their file that stress them out. But again, when they understand those three things of your culture, what you believe, why you
yeah.
believe it, and how you practice it, they're going to start seeing that practice. That they're going to start seeing more of what you do
Yeah.
without having to expose all the stuff we shield them from.
Absolutely. And that, if anything, we've learned from the dawn of technology and social media is that we are now living in a culture that's more transparent in the sharing of our beliefs than ever before.
Did you ever notice so many duck lips before social media?
Yeah, right.
I don't know about you, but I didn't.
But and there's issues within that culture that we're living in as well. But there's also these beautiful opportunities to capture an audience and a client base in ways that you never have before, right? So they're craving that type of knowledge. They're craving that type of experience. And so if you can practice a higher degree of vulnerability in being able to articulate and bring them into that world that you're a professional in and that you spend hundreds of hours in, what you will do is you will inspire higher degrees of respect, higher degrees of um, of excitement, and just this being drawn towards working. And ultimately, when you think about new lead generation,
Mhm.
you present a culture and behaviors that positively impact their lives in way they've never had with a realtor. You better believe they're going to be telling people like this,
Well,
you need to be with this person. I've never seen anything like it.
I think it comes down to the difference between attracting business and chasing business, right? A lot of us end up as a small business owner in the business of chasing business. We almost feel like, and that's a disadvantage, I feel, to have to do that.
Right.
Like, but when you're attracting business, you're attracting people to who you are, to your energy, to what your outcomes are. It's different. It changes. It
Right.
it 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 actually gives you a different level of influence with people too.
Well, that's key because John Maxwell defines leadership as influence.
Yep.
So leadership is influence. And so when you finish developing out your non-negotiable belief and value system and you actually turn it into a product, now you've actually just created an entire blueprint that you can use as a promotional tool. So if you're an agent who is adept in content creation and you're utilizing YouTube and you're utilizing the social platforms consistently, you now have an entirely new theme that you can spend time on in that creation. You can connect now to all of your content. You can weave in all of those objective values and beliefs and how they're reflected in the business that you're running and that you're performing on a daily basis. And again, it differentiates you. It humanizes you. It makes you somebody that people are going to be more drawn towards. And that's powerful.
It is powerful. Let's talk about, when you talk about developing these values, for someone that's never sat down to do this, what's a good exercise to get you thinking about what are my values? I mean, how do you even start that process?
It's a great question. The most important thing in what you said was sit down and pause and actually spend some time just thinking deeply about these things.
Mhm.
And a lot of it is going to come out of your own life experiences. A lot of it is going to come out of the families that you grew up in, the colleges that you came out of, and just going back and taking all of that wonderful fruit that you used as you matured as a human to now ask, whether you're a parent or a spouse or a friend or a business team member, you're going to be able to draw from those experiences and really identify the values that are guiding and leading your life choices. And I would encourage you to, again, not overthink it, but really make it as simply profound as possible, right? So when I develop out creed systems or culture systems within organizations to practice, I really like to stay in the rule of threes because it's memorable, right? It's easier to memorize and to hold on to information about 3 principles versus 12 principles, right? And you want your clients to be able to remember. So that 3 or 4 space as an individual agent of what are the 3 core value principles, 3 or 4 core value principles that really guide how I behave in my life, right? And what will themes will begin to come out of that, right? So you're going to sit down with your culture journal, if you want to call it that, and you're going to first identify, and you can make that list as long as you want, right? Just write down all of the value principles that you believe matter the most in how you perform in every aspect of your life. And then spend a little bit of time on that list and identify of that full list, what are the most consistent? What are the ones, and then what are the ones that apply to my business? And that's where you begin in developing the principles. And then you can get into answering the what, why, and how.
And I think too, if you're struggling with that, I've seen people do this where they'll Google like 200 examples of values. Because I think some people struggle to go, what, honesty sounds like a value. What else is a value? Sometimes we really struggle to even figure out. But then I've seen people also try to pick values that they think sound good, or I should believe in this, right? So, I'd say my advice is ask yourself the question, if honesty is a value, ask yourself the question, how do you practice that? Well, I don't lie. Is that true? If you're constantly lying, it's probably not a real value. Maybe it should be one. You recognize you probably should have that as a value, but maybe it's not.
It's a great point, Mike. And that's why I trademarked this product, the culture creed, because the creed is defined as a set of beliefs that guide the behaviors and actions of people. And oftentimes, and you'll experience this in everyday conversations, as humans, when we put our flag in the ground on a certain topic or a theme, most often you'll always hear people say, well, I believe that. And so sometimes it's easier to start there. And so if you're struggling to identify actual value principles, then start with your beliefs. What are your top 10 beliefs that guide your behaviors on a daily basis? I believe in being on time matters. And I believe that following through on my commitments matters, so and then you can start to, out of those individual beliefs, begin searching for what is the value that's connected directly to, that belief system.
Right. And I think too, that when you really try to break that down, and you're trying to figure out what's core of those, because what you mentioned was this belief matters, right? There's a difference between you might have a lot of different values, but your core ones, your non-negotiable, that might be different too. There's certain things that you just don't, no matter what, you're not breaking, right? So, for example, in real estate, we might find people that have a value. They value, call it flexibility. The reason they're in real estate is they don't want to be working for somebody else. They want to be flexible. They want more family time. The next person in real estate might value success or accomplishment. Their behaviors might be very different. Right. Again, some of these might be more just kind of fringe values they believe in, or they believe they should practice. Other ones are so core, they're non-negotiable. That's just who they are.
Correct.
So do you recommend trying to figure that out, or do you just kind of start with your overall list of what you believe?
I really do think that you start by creating that overall foundation, right? Because again, know thyself. There's part of the fruit in going through the process is for you to put down on paper, personal beliefs and themes that you think about all the time, but you've never actually turned into, something that you've journaled or that you've put down that now you can go to as a foundational representation. Right? It's no longer just kind of swimming around in your head. It's now become objective on a piece of paper. And so that's an important process to go through. And you're absolutely right. Everybody and every one of those beliefs and values are going to have, their own sub belief and values, right? So when you talk about accomplishment, okay, well, you can define the what, why, and how of accomplishment, but within accomplishment are going to be a number of other themes that are directly connected to how you actually fulfill what it means to accomplish
Mhm.
something. And so, it becomes kind of this beautiful and profound web of um of values and beliefs over time. But ultimately it's identifying the core, right? These are the value principles that are most reflective of how people will experience me on a daily basis.
I think too, when you start to understand people's value system, you start to understand them better and perhaps even have less judgment of them. And what I mean by that is, let's say I'm the type of person that I have a innate sense of justice. My value system is, just that innate sense of justice. And I find myself in a legal battle that I didn't create myself or didn't do anything wrong, but all of a sudden I'm in a legal battle. I might be the type that spends $150,000 just to fight that battle. And someone's like, what a jerk. You just, pay your 10 grand to get out of it and stop. But my value system is so strongly set that I didn't do anything. This is not fair. I'm going to fight this to the death, and other people around you might actually suffer and judge you for it.
Mm-hmm.
And likewise, I mean, think about real estate, right? We got some real estate agents that their belief system, some people believe like nothing is going to come easy. So if I'm not working my face off, it's not worth it, or I'm not doing something right. So that's what they become workaholics and they have to grind every dollar out of what they could do.
Mm-hmm.
But that's part of their belief system. They get judgment for that. The next person figures out a way to sit on a beach and make money. They get thought of as lazy and opportunistic, judgment for it. But these all come down to kind of value systems, what people believe in and what guides their behavior, whether they're aware of it or not. But I think when you understand that more about people and understand how they tick, you start to look at them more as an individual with less judgment.
Mm-hmm.
I think that helps you also, as an agent and as somebody that's serving the general public.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the challenges that has always been in larger organizational cultures is, the C-suite, as they often refer to culture as the soft skills.
Mm-hmm.
Which it really drives me nuts, because I really believe that your greatest investment in any company is your human capital.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's true, why would the behaviors of a human being be the soft skills? They should be the hardest skills, and they should be the ones that matter the most. And if we develop them, then ultimately they perform better because they feel more valuable and they have more purpose. And you should see a direct impact on revenue growth. And I do believe that that's what you'll over time be able to see in your own businesses, is that when you've developed this, when you know this more deeply about yourself, and you've identified ways in which to practice and develop these principles in yourself to have an impact on your clients, you will be able to over time compare your success against your value principles, right? As you develop that, and as you create ways in which to consistently practice those values in unique ways to impact the client, you will see over time, okay, I'm closing now X percentage more than I a quarter than I have ever.
Yep.
And so you'll be able to see, and you'll be able to see too also where it's not working, right? And that can change and help you develop new values to fill that gap.
But I think when you talked about with the soft skills versus hard skills, years ago, I heard a guy speak that I think he sold 3, maybe 4 companies, all of them $50 million or more in actual sale price, all around marketing and sales. Okay. And what he said was really kind of blew me away. And I think he's right. But he said 70% of the success of your company is going to be your people, not your model, not what you're selling, not what your business actually is. It's your people, right? So if 70% of the success of your business is coming from a guy that's sold multiple 50 to $100 million businesses, I kind of take that as as a lesson of law. He's right.
Yeah.
So if you're thinking about your culture, your belief system, your behaviors, your values as soft skills, as something that we should probably look at or give some credit to, it's actually the opposite. Should be getting most of your credit there, because with that right alignment, your people, with the right people, they're capable of almost anything.
Oh yeah.
I mean, any market condition, any obstacle that your company faces,
Yeah.
they're capable of almost anything with that right core group.
Absolutely. And a great case study for this is Chick-fil-A.
Mm.
you know, how is it that Chick-fil-A outperforms every other fast food chain in America and they're closed 1 day a week? Think of the transactions that they lose by being closed for 24 hours, and yet they outperform everybody.
Now that again, I was talking about scarcity mindset earlier, right? How many businesses would have the scarcity mindset of how much revenue are we going to lose closing one day,
Right.
right?
Well, so an example of that is, that their value principle around being more hospitable to every patron, right? Some would argue is better than most in the fast food industry. And one of the examples of how they practice that is the phrase, "It's my pleasure." Right. And
Mhm.
it's a phrase that took years to actually integrate into every franchisee's mindset, to where now today, not only are the workers trained in an "it's my pleasure" culture, but all of the clients experience, every time they come in and make a transaction, that "it's been my pleasure to serve you." Every person that comes through the drive-through, "It's my pleasure to serve you." And now the community all knows that when they go to Chick-fil-A, they're going to be treated at a
Mhm.
degree higher than they would in other restaurants, based upon an "it's my pleasure" value principle, and what, why, and how Chick-fil-A believes that needs to be practiced. And so it's a great example of how culture has a direct effect on revenue.
Mhm.
And so you got to start thinking about it, more as an actual product, the culture of whether you're an individual realtor or whether you're running a large team or a small business. You have to start looking at culture as being one of your company products that actually has a financial value, right? But what makes it more meaningful is that it first focuses on the people value.
Mhm.
And that's the key.
Now I'll tell you what Chick-fil-A when they first came to town here in Minnesota. I don't know about you, but it has this weird sign. I'm like, what the heck is this restaurant? I'm gonna go get a chicken sandwich. I can go to McDonald's. And then all of a sudden I noticed the lines. I'm like, okay, it's just because it's new. And then the lines for years, every time I go near Chick-fil-A, it's like around the block. Pretty soon I was convinced there's narcotics in that chicken. I'm like, they got to be putting something in there beyond chicken. What is
Yeah.
this? But to come to find out what the real deal is, and they worked on that how many years,
Yeah.
I mean, of kind of honing that culture
Yep.
and then scaling it. This is the kind of the interesting thing is it's not one store.
Right.
It's not like they had, one group of leaders in one store that did it. This is scaled across entire franchises.
Well, and what they did, Mike, is they tapped into the belief systems of millions of patrons across the country. So
Mhm.
when you choose to make your value principles objective, that are in alignment and designed to unify, and when they're well built out and they're used to impact your internal team, your client, and your community, then what happens over time is that reputation for the practicing of a chosen belief system now gives the clarity to the marketplace.
Mhm.
So everybody in the marketplace that shares, a same behavioral and, value and belief principle as Chick-fil-A is of course going to bring their business to Chick-fil-A. And I believe that is scalable across every industry.
I think so. And I think too, we talk about trying to figure out your ideal client or your ideal client avatar. With Chick-fil-A, instead of going broad and, trying to be everything to everybody, they connected with the people that had the similar beliefs, and that's what blew them up. And I think, again, scarcity mindset, we think that we have to be all things to all people,
Right.
which means you're no things to nobody,
Right.
right? So standing out on your belief system isn't a limiting factor.
Right.
It's actually the opposite.
Correct.
It helps people connect to you. So, the name of our broadcast here is Ask Us Anything.
All right. Let's
So
go.
we got a few questions rolling in now. So this is your opportunity, if you're in the audience, to bring some questions in. Type them in the chat. We'll get to your questions, but this is a great
Yes.
time.
Ask away.
Ask away. So, what are the key elements of a successful team culture? So that came in early. We kind of touched on that, but if you want to sum that up.
What are the key elements of a successful team culture? Well, I think team is the key there, right? So you're wanting to bring people together, right? And so, in Indianapolis, we identified 4 key elements that were already impacting the entire team, right? So, listening, for example, was one of our core non-negotiables, and the reason why we chose that is because as an offense, everything we do on a football field starts with listening. It starts in the huddle.
The huddle.
Right. And so we chose an element that was already universally impacting the team. So it brings us all together. The second was learning. And so as you know, in sports, you're every single day you're evaluating your performance and you're making improvements. You're evaluating your performance and you're making improvements. And so learning was another key element that brought everybody together. Right. And then we had language or communication, and actually, and this is all Tony Dungy, but we had love. Like, what does it mean to actually value and respect the people that you're working with? And so those are just examples of key elements. But I think
Before you move on, can you give my favorite acronym about that?
so within love, we had 2 really powerful acronyms. One was, we have the only Super Bowl ring in the history of football to have a belief system engraved on the side of the ring, and it was the word faith. And what it stood for was freedom for all individuals to trust and hope in each other, right? To have faith in each other, right? And then you had, Tony Dungy's approach to building a family, and you hear PJ Fleck with the Gophers talk about this all the time. That the acronym for family in football is forget about me, I love you.
Love that
Right?
one.
The power of selflessness, and how do you bring that in? So, but to answer your question, because the key elements are going to be different for every team, but it's identifying elements that are already being practiced across the whole team, that are already touching every team member. And when you can create a list and understand what those key elements are, then you're already starting from a foundation that is inclusive to the team. And that's
But when you talk about, listening in the huddle, you told me this before, how much of a system that was in itself.
Yeah.
Can you touch on that for just 60 seconds?
Another example of how when you understand a value and what you believe about it, keeping it as practical as possible. So we actually had a culture of the huddle, and the culture of the huddle was built out of 3 principles: stop, look, and care. Stop was the act of selflessness. When your quarterback, when your leader, Peyton Manning, in my case, comes into the huddle, everything stops. It's an act of selflessness. You're giving that person the stage of speech. Look is the pursuit of information. It's active listening, right? So not only were we called to use our ears, but we were actually called to actually look at Peyton and actually look right at his mouth, because in front of 80,000, 90,000 fans, sometimes it's hard to hear audibly what is being delivered. So if we can use multiple senses to actually focus on the words that he's forming. And then the last was care. So the power of empathy, and which is to put yourself in the position of the person you're working with. So if you can be empathetic towards the responsibilities of your team members, you will then better understand how the entire system works together and be able to do your job at a better pace. So, but it's just listen, if you can create a culture of an NFL huddle, you can create a culture as a real estate agent or as a small business owner. But it's just taking those key elements. It's taking those non-negotiables and building out a very practical approach to how you practice.
And think about that in the real estate space, talking about, the huddle, the team, right? What you're talking about is really sort of a team effort. How many times do we see teams in real estate get together and everyone's on their phone? They're not actually actively listening. There's a lot of ego in those teams too that get together, and they want to be the important one, not the selflessness aspect, right?
Right.
Very few real estate teams operate like a team.
Right.
They operate like, what can I tap into to support me? Not what can I do to bring the team up.
Yeah.
Right. So I think
It's
that's an important distinction.
It's a good distinction, because all industries that are driven by a transaction, they're always going to create the tension between money and people. And so, to Mike's point, real estate is a transactional industry. And if you're not careful, you'll end up caring more about the transaction than you do about the person, or than you do about yourself. And so you want to make sure you understand that transaction is always where the tension exists between people and profit.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that is your ability now to find moments where you can be more intentional about the people approach. You know, when you get into, you know, team meetings and team group settings, when you get into, you know, if you're going to a lunch and learn, if you're getting together with some real, you know, those are the times where you have to physically put the transaction down. Like you're putting it down and you're actually, right, stop, look, and care. You're stopping with the transactions. And now you're able to actively pursue and that builds relationships, right? And it creates and enhances empathy and things like that. So
I think too that with real estate agents too, a lot of times, especially in teams, it becomes more about what can you do for me. Real estate agents are really good at figuring out what they can do for their client because they know that's where the transaction lies. That's where the finality of the outcome is I'll get a deal done, right?
yeah,
But the problem is because we talk about real estate as a people business,
right.
but if it truly was the people business as a whole, not this won't apply to every agent. So I want to make that as a disclaimer that some people are really good at this, but as a whole, as soon as the transaction is over, and all we're talking about is that we're great relationship agents. When's the next time we're going to talk to that individual? We ghost them
Yeah,
constantly.
yeah.
So
Yeah. So
the argument of it's a people business and I'm a great relationship agent. Well, until you get the transaction done, then where are you?
yeah, listen, I will tell you that the the negative impact of a what can you do for me mindset, it can be toxic. And you know, I just want to encourage you, like, to take a mindset that says, that asks the question, what can I do for you? Right? It is always better to give than to receive. And the more you give and the more you lead with humility and selflessness, the more you lead with service, because the reality is you're in a service business. You're providing services to clients in some of the most important decisions of their life. You're helping them create a home for the people that matter the most to them. So imagine building that Chick-fil-A it's my pleasure culture. What is it for you? What is your it's my pleasure? You know, what can I do for you mindset? And and yes, that might mean that you go above and beyond. And does that take time and energy? And might that take a little bit of investment from time to end? Yes. But if you lead with a servant's heart, it's a servant leadership. If you lead by not asking what can you do for me, but instead what can I do for you? The impact that you'll have on their lives will be significant, and um, the amount of honestly, the amount of blessing and fruit that will come back around to you will be incredible.
I'll tell you, when you're focused on the money, you make less of it. When you're focused on the people, you make more of it. The money's
That's
got to
it.
be more of a byproduct. But
That's
that
it.
sounds like a belief system and values right there, Ben, that you just described.
Yeah, well, I mean it is. And again, you know, people over profit. I think that's a great way, very simple and profound way to look at it.
And if your belief system is the opposite, that's what's going to show up, whether you try to hide it or not. That's what shows up. All right, next question. I like this question. How do you stay motivated and continue to grow personally and professionally? So what I want to kind of put a spin on this question, Ben, is what we're talking about to grow these, to really kind of become the avatar of behavior for what our value system is. To me, that spells personal growth. Like, how do I actually have my behaviors mimic my belief system? There's growth in that.
Mhm.
How do you stay motivated to do that? Because in any growth, it's hard. Growth
Right.
isn't easy.
Yep.
So what keeps you going? That's a good question.
It's a great question. And so I can give you an example just from my personal life. So, I've identified the four core values of my life and how I approach being a dad and a husband and a coworker, a speaker, the things that I'm in, I try to apply those to my life. But then begins the continuous education of those value principles. So how I stay motivated is once I've identified those core values, I'm trying to carve out weekly time where I can press into an educational process on those values, right? So I want to learn more about qualities like integrity. And so I'm seeking out subject matter experts. I'm watching talks. I'm reading books, and I'm getting into really the belief of the power of being a champion learner. And I think within that learning is an incredible opportunity to experience motivation, right? You want to always seek the experiences of others, especially subject matter experts on these value principles. And within that is going to be a tremendous amount of inspiration and motivation, and making it a part of your system. You know that every Monday morning you're going to wake up 30 minutes earlier, and you're going to choose one of your core values, and you're going to spend some time either reading or watching some educational material, and really allowing that information to sink in and have its motivational impact on you.
Okay, I love that because it actually touches on what my advice was going to be on that. So first off, I love this practice. The more you keep learning, the less things become stale, right? So if you just learn something once and you think you're done, how do you stay motivated once it's like seeing one movie over and over again, you get sick of it. But if you're continuously learning, it always stays fresh. But I don't know if you just said this, but what you talked about doing is turning it into something habitual.
Yeah.
And when you turn it into habitual, motivation becomes less of a thing. It becomes more compulsive.
Right.
So, what I'm really hearing from you is take the motivation and turn it into compulsiveness, where
Yeah.
every Monday morning I got to get up and I can do my reading because I feel funny if I don't.
Right.
It's like any habit. If the trigger that triggers that habit, either good or bad habit,
Yeah.
you feel compulsive urge to do it. If you don't feel right.
Yeah. Another example would be and we practice this, believe it or not, in Indianapolis on the Colts team is the development of a small group network. And
Mm.
so we actually would meet with other teammates outside of the football field, and we would choose a different person's house once a week, and we would go over and have a meal. Families were welcome, but we spent time together outside of the performance field, and we actually poured into each other, had a chance to go around the table and talk about what we were experiencing during a very intense and long NFL season. And then each of us were able to pour into that individual and be motivating and inspirational to them during a long NFL season. And so if you think about that, when you look at the relationships you have within your industry, are there two or three people that you could pull together into a small group? And the small group is built for motivation. It's built for inspiration. So the idea is, find two or three other agents that are people that you know and respect and enjoy being around, and set up a time. Maybe it's once a week, maybe it's once or twice a month, but you get together, and each of you has an opportunity to go around the table and talk about what you're dealing with, not only transactionally but relationally, and really lean into the experiences of these other agents who are able to kind of pour in maybe some insights that you've not considered in the past, and that can be very motivating as well.
I think what you're talking about is almost a stealth accountability group. And we talk about accountability in business and having accountability partners, but that always seems so not transformational, as you call it, but conformational, conformative, right?
Mhm.
Like, being whipped into shape accountability wise. Why didn't you do what you're supposed to do? That's not necessarily a good feeling. But when you're talking about is more of a group that gets together, supports each other, but still has that accountability piece, because you don't want to show up to that group being the only one not doing what you say you're going to do, right? So it actually helps you. I also want to add too that I think when it comes to motivation, when you early adopt one concept, that is, you're never going to find an end. It's not about the ending. You're not going to all of a sudden become a perfect individual or a master of something and you're done. It's not about the ending. It's about the journey. And when you subscribe to that, to know it's never ending,
Yeah.
and that early on, and that's what you're signing up for,
Right.
it's easier to stay motivated when that's your initial thought process.
Absolutely.
We got one more question, Ben, and then we'll have to let these fine people get on with their day.
Sounds good.
Is there a particular piece of advice that has stuck with you throughout your journey? Other than don't eat yellow snow. I know we talked about that one.
Oh man. I'm just flooded with a lot.
Yeah.
Right? Because
You're trying to whittle down to
well,
one.
yeah, because you're around so many incredible performers. Um, man, I okay, so I'll just go right back to really the foundational belief system that I grew up on, right? And I talk about this in my keynote, but first and foremost for me that has been the most sustainable is really understanding my identity. And and why is that important? Because it's directly connected to purpose. And purpose could be argued to be the most foundational idea within the value of every single human being. Why are you here, and why are you doing what you're doing? And so for me, growing up, I was a pastor's kid, so I grew up in a faith-based family, and so I just bring that up to say that what was powerful for me was the idea of playing for something bigger than myself, right? That's going to be different for all of you. It might be religion for some, it might be family for others, it might be goals for other individuals. But I would encourage you to really lean into that purpose, right? Because the purpose is going to be, first of all, it's going to be the most motivational if you can connect your work to your purpose. But then what are you doing it for? Like what is a purpose bigger than yourself that's driving your choices every single day? It's
Let me
getting you out of bed every single day.
And let me add to that, because a lot of real estate agents, when we ask them that, this goes again to really only understanding kind of the surface tip of the iceberg of what they do and why they do it or what they believe. A lot of times, what I'll ask is, why do you do this? Why real estate? Well, I like to help people is the response. And I go, well, why not be an EMT or, a soldier or a firefighter? Why real estate? And so many people really struggle. And this is where I think we got to get deep on that purpose. Like, what is it about real estate or whatever you're doing, whatever your business is? Why that versus something else? And if you truly have a servant nature that you do want to contribute something, how so through what you're doing? And by the way, I do want to say too, before we got one more question we'll answer quick that popped up, but I do want to bring up too, Ben, if you could just spend a minute. I heard you talk about how you practice because one of your values is family, and I asked you explained once how you practice that in terms of having four daughters and how your behavior towards your wife matters.
Mhm.
I'd love for you to be able to touch on that because that was really kind of cool when you're talking about that, about how how you treat your wife and how you're showing your daughters how somebody should treat
Mm.
their spouse. I mean, that was a pretty powerful moment for that group of people we were talking to.
Well, again, just another example of creating a belief system around, what does it mean to be a father of four daughters? And and so here's my point. I was
Who
motivated.
did you tick off to
I
make that
was
happen, by
well,
the way?
yeah, I was motivated and inspired to grow in that area by learning. I I I began reading some very powerful books about raising girls, and in some of my learnings there was an incredibly high bar that was set on the realization that I'm the first, as a man, I'm the first example of what a hero looks like to my daughters. I'm the first example of how a man treats a woman because they see how I treat their mother.
Mhm.
And I never really thought deeply around that until learning and reading that. Then I became motivated to take that seriously. That when I come home every day, I'm going to do my best to leave work behind and to really be present, to these girls, and to make sure that I, because they're watching my behaviors, that I'm doing the best I can so that my behaviors are reflective of what I
Mhm.
believe and what I value. And then I can stand on that firm rock.
I think a lot of real estate agents too have that same opportunity, especially when their kids are watching them in a business and they're learning work ethic
Yeah.
and they're learning, how to run your own business, money and wealth management, all the ups and downs of the business. There's a lot that kids can learn from watching. If
Mhm.
you're open to teaching. Last question here. What are your key elements to inspiring team members at the highs and lows of their business?
Yeah, thanks, Dave Harvard, for that question. This is really good, and this question already shows, Dave, that you're thinking about the right things, right? Because as human beings, our lives really do look like a roller coaster, right? We're going to have highs. We're going to be in valleys. We're going to be at the mountaintop.
And this business is very much that way.
Yeah, we're going to be in the abyss. And so it really is a combination of celebration and support, right? And again, themes that I think we all understand are really important, right? We naturally come alongside the people we love the most when they're in a difficult situation, and we support them. We naturally celebrate the successes of the people we care the most about, without even thinking about it. And what I would encourage is that you actually turn those into a system. So what is going to be your system of celebration? So when your team members are doing well, what are some objective, practical ways in which you can consistently celebrate that success? And if you've created that system, now you can always go back to that foundation. You're not left sometimes going, oh shoot, I don't know how I'm going to celebrate this. No, you've built that, so you can go back to that system. And even more importantly, on the support side, right? And the support side really starts with humility and coming alongside and practicing these principles like listening. When people are in the lows and the struggles, a lot of times what they need is the right question. They need someone that is going to be able to come alongside, ask meaningful questions, and just listen, right? Oftentimes, I think when, especially if you're a more dominating personality and you are experiencing team members that are in those lows, you kind of like to come in as a steamroller and just assert all of your opinions.
Yeah.
And you're doing it, you might be doing it out of a thoughtful disposition, but the impact that it has on them actually is negative. And so I've just found and been taught by my mentors that coming alongside as a support system, asking good and meaningful questions and allowing them to speak and to share, and being a great listener, because in their sharing and in the listening, you will be able to learn what you need to learn on how to best support them.
And even so, if your questions are really good, you're actually helping them self-discover what the real problem is.
Okay. And here's the thing. And Dave, this goes back to what Mike was just saying. Create a list of questions, right? So let's not just talk about this and then all of a sudden you have a team member that's going through a crisis situation, and you've thought about the idea, but you've never actually sat down and articulated, well, what kind of questions would I actually ask in this moment? And now you're
a system.
And now you're left kind of going, how do I, whereas if you just spend a little bit of time and think through, okay, when I'm working with my team members and when they're going kind of through the valleys that we often face, what are the types of questions? And you can find a lot of this online on different subject matter expert platforms in social sciences. Like, what types of questions do you ask employees or team members when they're going through a difficult situation? And you'll find great examples of that, but create and make that an objective system, so that when the next time you find yourself in that position, you actually know right where you need to go, because you've already developed it. And now you can sit down and through that listening process, determine what are the best ways that I can support these people.
Now, you have an acronym for systems. What you just described is a system. It's a discovery system to figure out at the core of it what's really going on.
Right.
What was your acronym for system again?
Save yourself time, energy, and money.
Boom. Love that one. And I'm going to wrap up. We'll wrap this up with one other final thought. Excuse me. I think too, just being really good at sort of that identify, because you talked about subjective, right? Being subjective. I think when you have a team member that's got a problem, the why the problem exists might very likely be a subjective thought process. Their truth is their truth, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's true. It's from their perspective, right? So being able to identify subjectively their subjective view of what's wrong, some of those questions bring that stuff to the surface, and you can reinterpret, whether it's a Socratic method where you're just asking them questions that they themselves, get it, or you've got guided questions that guide them to the right answer. I think team leaders that are really, really good at what they do, and talk about a belief and value system. I met a lot of real estate team leaders that they're like, "Oh, I don't want the phone calls from the agents. I don't want to babysit these people. They're calling me at 8 o'clock at night and telling me to ask me how to put a deal together, yada, yada, yada." I'm like, but what is your belief system around being a leader? That
Mhm.
everybody doesn't need you? Because if they don't need you, right? Or maybe there's somebody else on the team would be better at that, but you need that's that
Mhm.
service, right?
Right, right.
Perhaps maybe that's what your team should be. So this goes back to Dave's question: is how do you inspire people? First up, do you have the right system in place in your team? Do you have the right belief system and thought processes? And do you have a system around those questions? Because in the moment when somebody's kind of panicking and you're trying to reinvent the questions every time, you're probably going to miss some stuff.
Yeah.
So I think it's a really, really good idea to have that system down, that because you're going to save weeks or months of trying to get to the bottom of it.
Right.
Really.
100%.
All right. So with that, Ben, I think we'll wrap up. We could talk all day long. I could
No,
talk
this
all
is
day
great.
long.
This is great.
We'll wrap it up. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you again. We'll have our next episode of Ask Us Anything advertised very soon. Hope you guys enjoyed Ben. I enjoy talking to this man every time I talk to him. And just for those that don't know, Ben is working with us at Realty Group, working on our culture. We've had a strong culture by default. We're putting one together by design as we speak. That's how we kind of
Yes.
met and started working with Ben. So, you guys have a great day. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.